I found him on the night I decided to quit. The house was too quiet, my husband's flannel still hanging on the chair where I'd left it the day he didn't come back from the mill, the photograph of my son on the kitchen table, corners curled from years of being touched, kissed, begged for answers. In the medicine cabinet, a plastic bottle rattled like loose bones. Outside, wind hauled across the flats and came down off the mountains cold and metallic, the kind of wind that strips a place to truth. I had the bottle in my hand when I heard it, the thinnest sound, a dry kink of air, somewhere between a squeak and a sigh. It threaded through the storm boards and slipped under my ribs. I thought it was the house talking. Old wood does that, especially in November, but then it came again, faint and stubborn and alive. I put the bottle down and stepped onto the porch. Pine Hollow, Montana, is not a town so much as a memory that refuses to fade. A two-pump gas station, a diner with a flickering PIE sign, a feed store that sells more gossip than grain. Beyond that, miles of open range and the Kestrel National Forest, its dark timber shouldering up against the sky. My place sits on the edge of all that, a sagging farmhouse with a porch that leans toward the road like it's trying to eavesdrop. The sound came from the cardboard box left on the top step. The word "free" bled down one flap in a hurry of black marker, rain soaking the letters into something that looked like shame. "Hey there," I said to the box, because loneliness will make you tender with anything that listens. The wind shoved its cold hand down the back of my coat as I knelt. When I peeled back the flaps, two yellow eyes looked up at me, not the warm coin yellow of barn cats, but old, silted amber, like pine sap fossilizing a fly. He was small, but heavy in the way river stones are heavy, all compact muscle under a pelt matted with rain. His ears stood a little too tall for a puppy and ended in tight, dark tufts. His muzzle was long. His smell was not milk-sweet like puppies smell. It was sharp and wild and mineral, like the inside of a rock creek. "Who did this to you?" I whispered, sliding my hands underneath him the way a person slides a question under a door. He was ice-cold and shivering so hard his bones ticked. His heart beat against my palms like a bird trying to escape a room. The storm spit as I carried him inside. I had not held anything living in a long time. Grief had taught my hands to be empty. But he fit in the cradle of my elbows and I could feel how badly he wanted to stay that way. I put him in a wicker laundry basket near the stove, lined it with my husband's old wool shirt, warmed milk on the stove, thinned it like I remembered doing when my boy was colicky and wouldn't take the bottle. I found a rubber dropper in the drawer where I keep everything that might someday save something. He didn't yip or whine. He drank like a machine built for one task and then curled into himself, belly tight and round, and slept. I sat there watching him breathe the way I used to watch my son breathe when I was afraid the world would forget to let him. I realized I had not turned the bathroom light back off. The bottle was still on the counter, the cap lying like a small white coin beside it. I left it there. Some things you leave where they can see you so they know you're not hiding. By morning, the storm glassed everything in thin ice. The basket was warm and empty. Panic cracked through me like lightning, but then I saw him on the kitchen rug, back legs sprawled, nose pressed under the stove door as if he were trying to crawl into the heat. I said, "Hey, no," and he looked up at me without blinking as if I were as interesting as a snowflake. I called him Ash because he arrived in a world gone to cinders and because a thing that looks dead can still glow underneath. The name held. He didn't seem to mind belonging to something. Marian from across the road is the kind of woman who can identify who drove by from the shape of the dust behind the truck bed. She keeps two cats that hate each other and a yellow mutt that loves everything. When she saw me on the porch that afternoon holding Ash in the crook of my arm, she came up the walk wiping her hands on her apron. "Where'd you get that pup, Maggie?" she asked, squinting. "Lord, he's a looker. Those ears." "Box on the step," I said. "Somebody left him." She leaned in. Her mutt Baxter slunk forward, sniffed, and then did something I'd never seen him do. He backed away with his tail down, a low keen in his throat. "Baxter," Marian scolded, all offended manners, but she didn't step closer either. "He ain't right for a dog," she said softly. "You see his eyes?" I saw them every time he looked at me. They were not puppy eyes. They were ancient coins struck with something older than barns and porches and the human wish to own. "Maybe he's one of those, what do you call them?" Marian flapped her hand. Designer mixes. Wolf dog. People get them off the internet and then realize a house ain't the wild. He's a baby, I said, heat in my voice I didn't mean to show. And he's staying. I didn't say he wasn't, she said, eyes kind. Just, keep him close, you hear? Sheriff's office don't like question marks with teeth. Ash grew like secrets do, fast and in directions I didn't expect. In a week he doubled, in 2 he learned to run, and in 3 he learned to move without being seen. He ate with a conscience-free hunger that made me buy red meat for the first time in years. He turned up his nose at kibble and oatmeal. If I cut the beef into pieces, he nudged them together with his muzzle and swallowed them as if they were one, as if breaking things apart made them less true. He didn't bark. Not once. He made other sounds, soft huffs when I came in from the cold, a closed-mouth chuff when I read aloud at night, a low curdled hum that made the hair at my neck rise when headlights turned down my road and didn't belong. He liked to stand in the threshold between inside and out, pause on the line where the porch boards meet the kitchen tile, as if choosing belonged to him now and he intended to practice. Winter hardens Pine Hollow into a different religion. The sky goes pewter. The wind goes door to door. Game runs lean. People get smaller in their coats and larger in their tempers. One night in December the stove went quiet in that way that means the flames are thinking about quitting. I was on the floor with kindling when something heavy hit the back door and made the hinges scream. Ash rose. There is no other word. He rose the way a shadow does when it decides to be a shape. Everything about him lifted and elongated. His chest came forward, his fur prickled until he looked twice his size, and a sound came out of him that no dog in Pine Hollow owns. It started low and rolled up through him, the note climbing the ladder of his ribs and spilling into the room, long and round and edged with metal. It was a sound that didn't ask questions. It was an answer. It pulled an answer back. On the other side of the door, something grunted. Would split with a gunshot crack and a paw the size of a pie plate swept under the gap, claws curling like black hooks. Another slam. The latch bowed. I smelled bare, sour and greasy, like meat that had forgotten to be alive. A starving one, a winter stray come down too close to town. Ash stepped in front of me, shoulders squared. He didn't launch himself at the door. He didn't scratch or lunge. He sang that note again, longer, a blade gone to violin. The paw stuttered, then froze. The weight shifted back. I heard huffing breaths, the scuff of heavy pads leaving the step. The porch boards creaked under the slow, deliberate turn of something that had changed its mind. The night swallowed the bear. Ash stood there a long time, listening to the empty as if it still held teeth. Only when the stove popped with new flame did he sit down. Only then did I realize my nails were half moons in my palms. "Good boy," I whispered, which was not enough for what he was, but it was what I had. He leaned his head against my sternum. I could feel the low hum of him, the animal version of a lullaby. If I had taken those pills, no one would have been here to hear it. The thought went through me quick and clean and left a space where something else could live. Word runs faster than water in a small place. After the bear, marry and let it slip to the waitress at Millie's who had a cousin at Fish and Wildlife whose girlfriend is not great at secrets. It took a week for the white state truck to roll up my road, fishtailing a little on the patched ice. A young woman in green stepped out, a wool cap pulled down over hair that might have been blonde if the day had given it more light. Badge on the jacket, Walker stitched over the pocket. "Ma'am," she said at the gate, polite but not rehearsed. "Anna Walker. I'm a ranger with the state. We've had reports of a large canid out here. I'm just checking on everyone's safety." "Everyone's fine," I said. "Except the back door." Her mouth did a quick broken smile. "Bears are a problem this winter." She glanced at the porch. Ash was stretched in the sun patch like someone who understood the geometry of warmth. He lifted his head. His eyes touched her and then returned to the light. "That your dog?" she asked. "He's Ash," I said, and I felt that you'll have to get through his name to get to him in my voice without meaning to put it there. She stepped onto the porch like a person who knows where every nail is and nodded to him low and sideways, not head-on. He watched her hand rather than taking it, tolerated the air around her fingers, then returned to the sun. Her eyes changed in a way that wasn't unkind, just older. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "I've seen a lot of dogs. He isn't one." "I know," I said. Saying it out loud rearranged something in the room. "But he's mine." "I understand," she said, and for a moment it seemed like she did. "There are laws." She didn't say them like a weapon. She said them like weather. "I found him in a box on my step," I said. "Or he found me. Either way, the law wasn't here." She took off her cap, rubbed her temple as if an old headache had introduced itself again. "If he's Wolf, he's protected. Which means also, he's not supposed to be in a kitchen." "Protected?" I said, tasting the word that could be a wall or a roof depending on how it was built. "I can look the other way while I look something up," she said. "There's a guy at the university. Michael Davis. Genetics. If he's special, if he's, say, a remnant population, we might argue for study instead of confiscation." The word she didn't say hung between us like cold breath. I kept my face the way you keep it when your child's fever peaks and you know either way the night will be longer than you want to live. Anna came back with Michael 2 mornings later. He was all elbows and glasses and apology, the kind of man who bumps his own doorway and says sorry to it. He didn't try to pet Ash. He sat at my table and asked questions the way good people pray, focused, a little scared of getting an answer. He measured Ash's skull with a tape, photographed him from 4 angles, brushed his fur to collect fallen hair. When he spoke, the words slid into the room like blades wrapped in wool. "If you'd told me this," he said, "I'd have called it a story. But Maggie, his proportions, the ear tufts, the coat. I think he's an old line. Northern Rockies, black phase, the kind trappers wrote about in the 1920s and guys like me decided were just men bragging to each other. If I'm right, he's rare. Maybe last of his kind rare." The phrase found the hollow places in me and rang. Last of his kind. The last of anything should be handled like glass and allowed to be what it is, not put in a room to be explained. "What does that mean for him?" I asked. "Tell me plain." Michael took off his glasses, polished nothing off them, put them back on. "It means arguments. Zoos will want him. Sanctuaries will want him. The state will want him nowhere near people. He glanced at Anna. "I want to argue for field observation. Let him stay with you while we learn, discreet as we can. But if this gets loud..." "Nothing good is loud in Pine Hollow," I said. For a while we tried to be small. Michael came at odd hours. Anna parked down the road and walked the ditch line, hat pulled low. Ash, contrary to the blood in his bones, was good at being harmless. He lay near my chair while I read, his breathing slow as a swinging porch. He followed when I went to the coop and lay under the cypress while the hens fussed past his nose. He ate meat from my palm and did not take my fingers with it. He listened when I said no like it meant something. But small towns are made of eyes. One morning a white county truck and 2 camo pickups came up my lane in a line. The men climbed out the way men do when they believe their boots are part of the law. The one in front had a salt and pepper mustache and the kind of careful smile people practice in mirrors. He introduced himself as Vic Wolf, head of the County Hunters Association, and I almost laughed at the name, which felt like a bad joke laid over a worse day. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "we've had complaints. Reports of a large predator on private property. Near children. Near livestock. Near me," I said. "And I'm the one he protects." "Ma'am," he said, voice folding itself into patience. "Predators don't choose the right side of a fence when they get hungry. We can take care of this quick and clean. Trank him, move him, done." "You'll put him in a cage," I said. "And when he doesn't behave like a lab animal, you'll say he asked for what comes next." The men with him moved toward the yard with nets and a gun that didn't shoot bullets. Ash stepped from behind the juniper and stood just inside the shadow of the porch. He did not bare his teeth. He did not lift his fur. He looked at me. "Don't," I said softly to the men and to the day. "Please. A truck door slammed at the end of the lane. Anna was already walking fast, badge bright in the noon light, Michael behind her with a manila envelope held up like a flag. She didn't shout, she didn't have to. "Hold it," she said, calm as cold water. "You're out of your lane. Fish and Wildlife has interim authority here. We have a provisional permit for study." "This is county," Vic said. "This is safety. This is state," Anna said. "And this is science. And this is a citizen's yard. You want to fight, do it in a courtroom." For an hour the air above my grass held nothing but the weight of men's words. They cited codes. They invented new ones. They got red in the face and then white. I stood with my hand in Ash's ruff and felt the slow tidal rise and fall of him. His skin was warm. The sun on his coat smelled like cedar. In the end, Vic said what men say when they are not used to going home without a thing in their truck. "Fine. But this ain't over. If anything happens, it's on you." He jabbed a finger in the air at nobody in particular, and they left like a storm does. First the big noise, then the smaller parts, then the last mutterings of thunder as if the day felt embarrassed by itself. We tried again to be small. But once a line has been drawn in public, people come to stand on it. The sheriff's deputy rolled by slow, twice a day. Women at church stopped asking how I was and started asking if I was safe. Someone left a note in my mailbox that said "Monsters don't love you" in all caps, which is how cowards always write. Michael's test came back the way a truth does that everyone already knew. Rare. Old line. A thread left in a tapestry most hands had already declared finished. He thought we'd won something, that a designation in Latin could be a shield. A week later, 3 trucks arrived without turn signals, without patience, with a paper stamped more times than a passport. Men in camo got out. The kind of men who enjoy carrying things that make quieter things stop moving. The one with the papers read me the words like reading was a knife he knew how to use. By order of the Department of, the rest bled out. Ash rose from under the porch. The men lifted their guns the way hands lift when they've practiced. "No," I said to Ash, and because he knew my voice the way children do, he stopped. He stood. He watched the men the way fire watches dry grass. "We'll use a tranquilizer," one said. "Painless." He raised the rifle. In the same breath the day changed. It began in the trees with a long, low note that slid its body through the spaces between branches. Another answered, closer. Another, closer still. The men shifted, too much thinking at once in their faces. Anna stepped to my side, her hand on nothing, ready to grab something if she had to. Shapes appeared between the pines, not suddenly but with the kind of certainty the horizon has. Gray. Black. A red-brown so old it looked like rust. 7 shapes, shadow-stiff, moving with that liquid economy wild things have when they do not intend to argue a point twice. They were not looking at the men. They were looking at Ash. The big gray in front came forward, head low, tail level, the ghost of a scar along one cheek like a map of bad winters. He stopped 10 paces from the porch. Ash stepped down 1 step, then 2, until they were laid out on the plain of my yard like a decision. The gray made a small sound. It wasn't a demand. It was a statement. Ash looked at me. There are moments in a life when every story you are made of stands up in you at once. The girl who thought the world would be kind if she was, the young woman whose husband was years late to dinner, the mother whose son's truck was found near a river with the keys still in the ignition, the old woman with a box on her step and a heartbeat in her hands. All of them stood. All of them said the same word. "Go," I said. "Go, baby. Go where the song comes from." He pressed his head against my chest, the way he did on cold mornings, took one breath of me, a last scent of coffee and old wood and grief that had learned to sit down, and then he turned and went to the gray. The gray touched noses with him, quick and efficient, and then the pack turned together, a school of muscle changing direction under the skin of the day. They were almost at the tree line when Ash stopped and looked back. Those eyes, old amber, lock and key. I raised my hand. My palm shook like a leaf. He lifted his head once, Emotion so small you could have missed it if you hadn't taught it to yourself by living. They slid into the woods. The woods closed. The men put their guns down because there was nothing left to point them at that wouldn't make them look foolish. The paper with all the stamps hung crooked in the air like a thing that had failed at being real. Michael exhaled the way the saved do. Anna put her hand on my shoulder and didn't say I'm sorry because she could feel how sorry would be the wrong size. After that, the house learned a new quiet. The bowl I kept by the back step stayed empty. The flannel shirt on the chair went back to being a shirt. I read out loud at night out of habit and then laughed at myself and stopped. People pretended not to watch me in the post office. I pretended not to care. Winter came again and shuffled its deck over Pine Hollow. One midnight, the porch boards creaked. I thought wind. I thought old wood remembering where it wanted to be. Then a sound, soft as a secret, threaded through the door, a low, breathy whine that climbed up the octave of my name without using any letters. I opened the door and there he was at the gate, not on the porch, not one step closer than the line between his world and mine. He was larger. The puppy's roundness had gone to angles, the angles to something carved. He stood like a promise kept. Behind him, two shadows ghosted the ditch and then were gone. "Hey Ash," I said like we'd left a conversation and could pick it up. He didn't come through. He didn't try. He stood, breathing, frosting the air, and in that white we wrote everything we were not saying. After a minute that was the longest and best of the year, he turned and went the way he came. I put the bowl out anyway. In the morning, it was empty and the snow around it was a tangle of stories written in small moons. He came every winter after that. Not every night, not on a schedule. Sometimes I thought the night moved wrong, too fast, too thin, and I'd go to the door and there he'd be, as if my blood had rung a bell he could hear from the ridge. Once he brought her, a gray with clever eyes who looked at me and then at him as if to say you chose well, and then they melted back into the timber like smoke. Once, in a year kinder than most, two black pups tumbled at his heels. They climbed my steps and sniffed the doormat and sneezed, offended by the old dust of people. He called them back with a sound not meant for me and they went, legs splayed, paws too big for their plants. I got older in the way you can't bargain with. My knees turned to weather vanes. My eyes decided some distances were none of their business. Michael and Anna got married in the little church that pretends every wedding is the first. They built a small research station at the edge of the kestrel, the kind with a generator that complains and a whiteboard full of names that belong to animals who will never answer to any of them. When they came by, they brought apple pie and words like recovery, and lineage, and protected status. And for once the words fit the good they were trying to do. The last winter I remember without reaching for it like a dropped glove, a storm came down that took the power and the road and the part of me that believed I had another storm to spend. I went to bed with the flashlight under my pillow and my husband's flannel on top of the quilt, and I dreamed of water the color of old nickels, and my boy standing on the far bank with his hands cupped around his mouth, calling my name. When I woke, the door was open. Marian says she found me in the morning, the house cold, the lamp on the floor, the door leaning against its hinges like it had decided to rest. She says she called the sheriff and then sat on the porch steps and held my hand where it stuck out under the blanket the paramedics pulled up to my chin, and she told me all the gossip I would have wanted, even though nobody could prove I wanted anything anymore. People like stories to end where they can stare at them without having to move. Marian says that when they carried me out, there were tracks in the yard, not people tracks, not dog, not anything she'd try to name out loud if she wasn't ready to argue with half the county. Big, measured prints, 7 pairs, coming from the trees to the edge of the porch and stopping there in a neat, respectful line. The snow at the gate was scuffed like something had turned in a circle, trying to make up its mind. Someone had left a single rabbit bone by the steps, clean as a prayer. Folks said what folks say. That wolves don't mourn. That animals don't remember. That people make themselves feel better with stories. Anna shrugged and said, some of us are people and some of us are stories. Sometimes if you're lucky, you're both. They put me in the ground on a Tuesday that smelled like iron and old pine sap. Marian says that night she heard singing from the ridge, long, low, and layered, one note, then two, then all the voices stacking up until the air held them like a bowl. She opened her window and said, "I hear you, Ash," and the song folded back into the trees. If this were the place I usually stop, I'd say that's the end. A woman and a not dog. A door open to the right kind of goodbye. But you're here because someone, maybe Marianne's nephew with too much time and a YouTube channel, maybe you yourself wandering at midnight with your phone holding your face together? Put this story where eyes go. So let me tell you the one thing I learned late and hard and would offer to anyone who'll listen. People will say monsters don't love you. They'll be half right. Monsters made by men, the kind stamped with rules and carried like rifles, don't love anybody. But the wild is not a monster. The wild is a mirror. If you put a heart steady enough in front of it, sometimes it will reflect one back. Ash wasn't a dog. He wasn't mine. But the night something tried to break my door down, he stood between my life and the dark. When a world older than me called, I stood between him and a smaller cage. We both chose right. If you've listened this far, if you felt even a small warmth rise in your chest like a stove catching, I'm going to ask you for something simple. We live in a time that eats attention and spits it out empty. Stories like this make their way by handfuls, carried person to person. If it meant anything to you, say so out loud. Tap the little heart. Leave a comment. Tell me if you've ever taken in something you didn't understand and loved it anyway. Tell me if the wild has ever looked back at you and not blinked. And if you want more stories like this, quiet ones that turn out to be loud in the right places, hit subscribe so you'll know when the next one finds its way here. I can't promise you the world will always be kind. I can promise that sometimes on a winter night when the wind is cruel and you've left the door open without meaning to, something you once saved will come back and stand at your gate. It won't cross. It won't need to. You'll look at each other across the old wooden line and understand that love doesn't always live in the same rooms as the people who taught it how.